in our business. And this is the meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee of the Manatee Sarasota Metropolitan Planning Organization, Monday, May 12th, 2025. Again, we are one person short of a quorum, but we're going to proceed with our agenda as we can. And first, I would ask all of us to stand for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We are now at public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on a specific agenda item or under public comment section is requested to fill out a public comment card and provide it to staff. Speakers are limited to 2 minutes. We have 2 such requests, and the first is from Lance Thomas, 2546 Bay Street. 2 minutes.
All right. Hey, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Lance. I'm here representing the Sarasota Mobility Alliance. We appreciate FDOT's focus on promoting the traffic safety culture. It's a vital step, but it must be more than a public messaging campaign. Culture change begins with street design and policy decisions that prioritize human life over vehicle speed. At the recent long-range transportation planning meeting, we heard from municipalities across our region, large and small, share their aspirations to increase walkability, improve access to transit, and make biking safer and more practical. These goals reflect a growing recognition that our transportation system must work for everyone, not just drivers. Yet many of our roads remain hostile to people on foot, on bikes, or using mobility aids. If we want to promote a safety culture, it must be backed with infrastructure that reduces conflict as much as possible, like roundabouts and our grade separated crossings of the Legacy Trail. Infrastructure that slows traffic in dense and vulnerable areas by design and invites people to behave safely, whether they realize it or not, or whether they make a mistake. We urge FDOT and the MPO to align this cultural message with actual investments in protected bike lanes, complete sidewalks, safer crossings, and transit-friendly road design. A true safety culture is one where people of all ages can feel confident navigating the communities and without fear. Let's ensure these bold visions expressed in long-range planning don't just stay on paper. Together, we can match our values and with action to make zero traffic deaths a shared and achievable goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. Next, we have Danny Williams from Central Avenue in Sarasota.
Yeah, I'm Danny Williams. I'm also with the Sarasota Mobility Alliance, and this will not be nearly as polished as Lance was. On the promoting traffic safety culture agenda item that we have today, I'd like to caution us to lean away from what sounds like victim blaming much of the time. If no one's complaining about roads, it's all about other drivers and obeying the laws. The drivers are behaving on the roads the way they're put in front of them. We've known since the 60s, and I think I read a study from the 40s even, where people don't care so much about what the law is, they care about what they're comfortable with. So we need to build roads that are comfortable for people to do the right thing. Make it easy to do the right thing. Don't make it an enforcement all the time. Lean a little more towards safety and a little less towards throughput, and maybe we'll kill fewer people. On item number 2, the blind cars. I'd like to, when that agenda comes up, I have some questions I'd love to hear answers to. How does the scale? Is it scalable to anything above personal transportation? Is it a transit thing? Is this just moving traffic jams over our heads to being louder instead of being on the ground with us? Will this exacerbate parking issues because these things have to have a place to go once they get somewhere? If they're not carrying a lot of people, that's at least going to be the same problem we have now with parking. And what's the use case? Who is the audience for this? On the third item is the Ed Smith study. I'd like to remind us that we talk a lot about spring training and the traffic and how to get in and out of a game. It's only 1 month a year. I have a hard time carrying a lot if people have to sit an extra hour in traffic to get to and from a ball game, especially when there's other ways to get there. I do appreciate if we keep our mind on year-round road uses and commuting around that area. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, since we still lack quorum, I'm gonna move the agenda a little bit and ask that we move into our presentations before we get to our action items that require a vote. So if that's not too disturbing, I'd like to go to the FDOT report and to Keith. Mind getting up early?
I'm Keith Robbins. I'm the District Safety Administrator for District 1 of ADOT. And I want to appreciate your comments, both of y'all, about what traffic safety culture, and hopefully I'll talk to a little bit of that tonight, because I agree with you completely. And really, we asked this question on a survey on our website not long ago. And 74% of the people, when we asked, what concerns you most while driving, it was other drivers. And so what this speaks to us is it's a behavior issue. And when we talk about drivers, it's important to note here that even though it says drivers, we're talking about all users of the transportation system. So motorists, bicyclists, pedestrians, anybody, and planners for that matter. So these are some of the impacts of traffic safety on society. You look at the numbers there of people that have died on our roads in 1 year, more than 38,000. More than 2 million people injured in crashes. Leading cause of death among U.S. young adults. U.S. crash rate twice that of other high-income countries, and nearly $1 trillion annually in economic and societal impact. It's a huge amount of money. So this, given its, like I said up there on the slide, its moral and economic significance, reduction of fatal and serious injury crashes should become a national public health priority. I'm not really sure. But let's look at what should we be asking ourselves? How do behavior choices affect us? All of these things are up there, but the one I did want to put up is disregard for laws. And to your point, sir, I agree with you to a degree about the facility being, good for the driver. But the piece that I'm talking about here are specifically things like if it's a red light, that means stop. If it says no right turn, that means don't turn right. If it says no left turn, don't go left against traffic. We have people on the interstate off-ramps here where we posted no right turn on red. And I'm sitting there and people have made the decision to stop, and then they consciously make the decision to just go ahead and turn. That is poor driver behavior. We have an incident down in Lee County where we have closed off a median and said no left turn. We put delineators out on the roadway. People are turning left, going against traffic in the opposing traffic lane to then make an illegal turn through the median. That is driver behavior. That has nothing to do with the roadway being, we're trying to do, like you said, make the roadway to drive people doing the right thing. But yet people are still making the wrong decision. How do we change that? How do we change that? Society and culture will help change that. This is a cultural model. It's not my model. It came from a Federal Highway presentation, so I'll put that out there. That's where I stole it. Societal, social environment drives shared thoughts, and that drives our willingness to do certain things. That means that drives our behavior, how we associate with people, the people that we associate with, and what else is going on. What do we allow in our society? If we allow people to continue to behave, then they're still going to behave poorly. So how do we change that? So when we talk about a traffic safety culture, what is a traffic safety culture? It's that shared belief system of people that can influence road user behavior and stakeholder actions that impact traffic safety. Now, when we talk about this, I mentioned that it's a public health issue. We talked about behavior is influenced by beliefs, and that we develop those beliefs in a lot of different ways. And we talked about what a traffic safety culture is. So what are some strategies that we can use to impact our traffic safety culture? There's a lot of different things, but first and foremost is recognizing that it can be improved by growing beliefs that increase protective behaviors rather than focusing only on reducing risky behaviors. We have to do that. We have to be proactive, and that's in accordance with the Federal Highway Safe System approach, is understanding that people are going to make mistakes. But if that's the case, then we have to be proactive to not only in an engineering aspect to make the road where it's harder for somebody to make mistakes, but we have to educate people. We have to reinforce that education so that people will not make mistakes. Increasing the capability of our safety stakeholders to form partnerships that can integrate strategies. That means it can't just be FDOT that's doing this. It can't just be a police organization that's doing this. It's got to be everybody, citizens on up to the leadership of the community. Everybody working together and reinforcing these behaviors and pushing these beliefs to make sure that we improve traffic safety. And in order to do that, all of these together can be more effective in helping us reach our goal of target zero. So how do we get that? One of you mentioned about creating, it's a shared understanding about safety culture. Discuss those questions so that people know what we're talking about when we say traffic safety culture. Part of it is a belief of how do we prioritize the right projects to build our system more safe, but it's also about how do we define it and making sure that everybody understands what it is. How do we know that we're accurately perceiving what our community's traffic safety culture is, or what the people think it is? People may think that, oh, well, we're in the safest, county, community, state, whatever. But if the numbers don't back that up, then something is wrong. Something is not being effective. And so we have to challenge those beliefs on, are we being effective, and what are some other ways that we can change that? We have to examine our own culture before trying to change the culture of others. Now, you can take this to be FDOT, you can take this to be your family, your school, your business, your county. Everybody needs to examine how is traffic safety culture expressed and held in your own organization. Are you taking it serious? Because if leadership doesn't take it serious, then everybody underneath it doesn't take it serious. I'm retired Army. There was a thing that I was taught growing up that soldiers will only do what the leaders check. And if leaders aren't checking it, then guess what? That means it's not important to the leaders. And if it's not important to the leaders, then the people down below are not going to think it's important. So leaders have to make it important. I mean, leaders across the community, every aspect, and you don't have to be in an elected position or a head of a business to be a leader. And every one of you, by your role in here, I think understands that. Find opportunities to adopt traffic safety culture as an approach to traffic safety goals. So our goal in Florida is target zero. That's zero fatal and serious injury crashes on our roadways. Is that an unrealistic goal? Is it unachievable? I don't believe so. I think it is achievable. In 1961, did anybody think that we could make it to the moon and back before the end of the decade? Sure, a lot of people did, but guess what? We did it. How do we do it? Because a leader set up and set the goal and set everybody on that path to making it happen. And even after that leader died, that culture was still there, that 6 years later, we achieved his goal. So it can be done. There's nothing that can't be done. Now, what are we trying to do in District 1? We're in the midst of preparing a District safety strategic plan. This is not a plan that's full of roadway projects. This is a plan that is looking at how we foster a traffic safety culture, focusing on changing behaviors and prioritizing getting to zero fatal and serious injury crashes. We're going to have 1, 3, and 5 year goals. It will be based at its heart on the safe system approach. And it'll be heavily focused on internal and external collaboration and partnership to help us reach these goals. These are our top 3 objectives with the main strategies that we hope to use to achieve those objectives. We've held 3 different public workshops, one down in Fort Myers, one in Polk County, one out in Sebring. We've done some internal staff workshops. We're in the process of writing now, and we're hoping by the end of the summer we'll have a plan ready to share to NPOs and counties across the district on how we want to achieve this. But again, it's based off of culture, changing the culture. It's education, engagement, it's outreach, it's teaching people and prioritizing projects that have safety as their goal. And that's a difficult thing to do in a budget constrained environment, I know, but if we want to be serious about getting to zero fatal and serious injury crashes, then we have to take the steps necessary to get there. So let me show you a little bit of a picture about Manatee and Sarasota County. This is Manatee, shows you our fatalities and serious injury crashes, leading up from 2018 through 24. In 24, we saw a reduction in fatalities, but an increase in serious injuries across the county. Same thing in Sarasota County. Reduction in fatalities, but an increase in serious injuries. And the heat balloons on there show you where all of these crashes are going. And this is countywide. This is not just on the state system roadways. And these slides are available from the NPO, so you want to study these a little bit closer. This is what we're showing in our 5-year work program, just of our federal highway safety improvement funds, program funds. With District 1, we've got 71 projects scattered across all 12 counties. And several of those are district-wide projects, and they include the treatments that are shown up there. 13 of those are here in Manatee County, 9 are in Sarasota County. Because that's where we have an emphasis of fatal and serious injury crash corridors. We have our top 20 corridors. You'll hear Michelle in a moment talk about John's top 20, and let me qualify what she means by that. We have data that we pull from Signal 4 Analytics that shows us where the crashes are throughout our district. And we look, when we talk about our district top 20, that is the top 20 corridors across the district as per fatal and serious injury crash data. But we can manipulate that set of data to show us where are the top 20 pedestrian corridors, where are the top 20 bicyclists, where are the top 20 rural, where are the top 20 for intersections. We can do all these different things so that we can see where we need to focus our energy. Right now, we've got $21 million we're invested over 10 projects over the last 6 years, and we've got 34 million programmed right now against 15 projects over the next 5 years. And what we're seeing is by these efforts, we're looking at a reduction of over 100 fatal or serious injury crashes district-wide on these top 20 corridors because of these improvements. Now, these are engineering improvements, but the way we see this number, this 112, go much higher at a quicker rate is to change the behavior of the people using the system. I agree with you, sir. It's not about victim blaming. Victims are not the ones to blame because they're gone. The people to blame are the ones that are still here. And it doesn't matter what role you have in the system. We're all to blame if we don't do something, either engineering wise, financially, education, engagement. It takes all of that, and it takes all of us working together to make the right decisions to make this number improve. One of the events that we had here recently to try and bring public safety more awareness to the public is our Operation Spring into Safety. It was our second one that we did. Last year was down south. This year was at State College of Florida campus here in Bradenton. We partnered with the Sheriff's Office and the college, had a great event. More than 1,200 people came out to see it. We had nearly 200 volunteers. It was a really cool event. It was a great day. We had all sorts of equipment out there and information. We had bike rodeo, helmet fittings, all sorts of things to make people aware of public safety here in this region. And it went so well, we're going to do that again next year back at the same location, probably again during the month of February. One thing that is not on here that I wanted to let you know is that we are also in partnership with the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Manatee Marauders. If you went to a Pirates game during spring training, you saw our full page ad in their program. If you go to a Marauders game, you'll see our full page ad in the Marauders season program. And if you come out on the 1st of August on Friday night, that is when we are the sponsoring agents or agency, whatever they call it, partner for that game. It's the Party with Barty game. Barty is their mascot. And we'll have a booth there for Target Zero and a public announcement. We'll be giving out items and have opportunities to get more. And if you get there early enough, you'll get to see yours truly throw out the first pitch. So it's a night that we hope will attract a lot of people so that our message of public safety can be heard. At that point, you can go to this QR code and see our website. We have a lot of information there, a lot of resources, a lot of information about our studies, our newsletter. We have some copies of our 2024 newsletter back there on the table. Please take a copy. before you leave, because these are the last ones that we have, so I want you to take them. Because, I think next week is when our first edition of the 2025 newsletter will be coming out. And, they're nice, magazines, and they have a lot of stuff in there about what we're doing district-wide. So I'll be happy to take any of your questions now.
What I would like to know is if you have data on how many serious injuries and just there are people getting hit by cars that are in wheelchairs or walkers that are on the road.
That's a very good question. I'd have to say I don't know, because it depends on what's reported on the crash report. We have access to the crash report data in Signal 4. And what my guys do is they go in and they look when we say, Scott, I need what's the crash history data for this intersection for the last 5 years. He goes in and looks not just at the numbers, but looks at all the crash reports. So he can tell me it was a right angle crash, it was a head on crash, whatever it was. And we talk about some of the who the fatal and serious injuries were in that crash. But it depends on the police officer, whoever wrote the report, if they put that information in there. So sometimes it is available, but sometimes it's not.
Because I saw several people last week on 14th Street, 41, what I can call it, from north of Cortez on the road going north in wheelchairs.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's a behavior thing.
Well, it's because there's no.
Yeah, if there's no sidewalk there, then that's an infrastructure issue. But sometimes because of the restrictions of the roadway, what right of way is available, we may not be able to put a sidewalk there, or we may not be able to improve the sidewalk there. And so that's where partnerships and collaboration are so important, is to figure out if we just physically can't fix the sidewalk, we don't want them in the road. So where can we put them? Where else can we put them? And that's the only way we can do that is working with a partner to figure out.
Dr. Robbins, with that one section of your top 20, you've got 13 in the circle there. Are we finding that there's a commonality maybe with a design issue, or are we seeing it as being, sometimes maybe the design is throwing drivers off and they think they're going a certain direction and there's not proper signage there? And then what impact will the county pulling away from school zone cameras have on some of this data? Because that's going to be a variable that changes.
It's hard to say about this, just a school zone camera first, because I know at least here in Manatee County, didn't they say to turn that off?
Yep.
So I was disappointed to hear that, to be truthful. But so there may not be any change, because if they're not going to use the cameras, then we're not putting a tool in place that could potentially affect the behavior of motorists in the area. I was in Polk County driving into Bartow one morning last week, and I was behind school bus stopped, red lights flashing, stop signs went out, and sure enough, some bonehead blew right on by. Thankfully, the school bus has cameras, so I'm really hoping that he got his photo taken, and we'll see his mug in the newsletter here pretty soon. But so I don't know, it's hard to answer, because if they're not going to use them, then what's the influence? But the infrastructure, as far as signage and things like that, what we've seen so far is the historical data, at least here in Manatee County. Signage and driver understanding the roadway is not so much the factor. A lot of it's volume of traffic on certain roadways, but a lot of it's driver behavior as well, speeding, aggressive driving, things like that, or failure to yield properly. So again, either disregard or just not understanding the traffic laws as they apply to a four-way intersection or things like that. But also the growth, the volume. The roads, 13 of our top 20 in the district are here in Manatee County. And a lot of those are US 41 and Cortez and things like that, where you're seeing the roadway that was built a long time ago and just the sheer volume of traffic on there. It's hard to change that now unless you do a complete reconstruction of the roadway. So what we're doing is we're trying to do things like putting in that concrete traffic separator to keep some of the people from making left turns across oncoming traffic. We're reducing where you can do that to try and bring those numbers down.
And I guess the part that I'm thinking about, I would be more specific, on Cortez at 75th, if you go from Cortez 75th up to 53rd, they've got new development happening on the right-hand side. There's now 3 circles from Cortez to the 53rd location. These tractor trailers can't get around them.
If you're, I'm not familiar with those roundabouts on Cortez. I mean.
They're right on 75th, between Cortez and 53rd.
Oh, okay.
It's 3 in a row. By the time it gets to string, it is
I just
another
came
one,
that
right? Yeah, that's why I'm asking about.
I'm gonna throw you the thing that my wife hates that I use, and when I say that it's not my road. So I can't really answer to that. But what I can speak to is where we have a string of 3 out on 64.
Okay.
Those semis work perfectly fine through those. They may try to tell you they don't, but I used to be the freight guy for 7 years. I was at the forefront of teaching the trucking industry that those roundabouts are designed for you to safely operate through them. So they can be done. Now, I can't really speak to the ones out on 70, but now I know which ones you're talking about. They are a little tight. The geography there is built more for regular cars rather than semis. So one of the things that we look there is to try and work with the trucking industry and the community, the freight industry, that that we might need to either modify those or come up with some alternate routes. Any other questions?
Thank you very much. Next, we're gonna have a presentation from Michelle on something that's really interesting. Advanced air mobility.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Peranto. I'm with the Florida Department of Transportation. I'm the transit administrator. Don't let that throw you off, because today we're going to talk a little bit about aircraft. Our topic is advanced air mobility. I'm going to give this to you in a very high level presentation and high level information. We don't have a lot of details today, but in the future we will. So what is advanced air mobility? The acronym is AAM. So if you hear that out in your community, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about these types of aircraft that look a little bit like an airplane, look a little bit like a helicopter. They take off like a helicopter. And when they take off, they kind of act like a regular aircraft. Those propellers come down and it's like an airplane. So it is really a cool vehicle or aircraft. Where they take off from, those are those red words up there. The acronym is eVTOL, so you can't really say that too easily, but it means electric vehicle takeoff and landing. So the aircraft are electric, so kind of like your electric vehicles that we have on our roadways today. These things need to be charged in the same way. So that's what they look like. Again, your acronym is AAM and eVTOL. A lot of folks get a little tripped up with, isn't it just a drone? Well, no, it's not just a drone. The drones are a lot smaller. They are unmanned and they're controlled remotely. So with these aircraft that will be flying under AAM, Advanced Air Mobility, those do have pilots in them. Those pilots have to be registered and have licensure, and all that is developed under our Federal Aviation Administration. And then they also fly at around 1,000 to 3,000 feet, where a drone is only allowed 400 feet. So they've created this newer space for them to fly in. So it's below your jet, above your drone. Where will they take off from? Today, they're likely going to take off from your airport. So right up the road, right? I'm right here actually, is the Sarasota Bradenton Airport. They're already in discussions and have plans for whatever it is that they need to be doing. In the future though, maybe they'll take off from these things called vertiports, and those vertiports might be not at an airport. So that's a wait and see. A lot of this is a wait and see what will happen, but today airports have, some of them already have the space for it. They're already treating helicopters. Why is this so important to us in Florida? Because that first bullet, we're nationally recognized to be the leader of all of our states, and so that's pretty impressive, right? And how did we get there, and why are we recognized as that? We'll get to that in just a minute, but because we are our central office, those are our folks up in Tallahassee, I kind of call them my boss. They've developed a guidebook for all of you all of us in the industry, our airports, our transportation planners, anybody who is interested and needs to be in the know of what's happening with the AAM, especially from a planning perspective. Without a proper plan, usually things will fail, and sometimes it's pretty quick. So we're trying to get the community set up for success, because we do want to be the leaders and this above all of our other states. Here's why Florida's so attractive. These are our airports. Somebody earlier this morning asked how far can they go, and Ryan had the answer. Thanks, Ryan. About 100 miles. Because our airports are so close together, it makes Florida very attractive to go between airports, right? I heard you say earlier about what is this really going to be? How is this going to reduce congestion? You have to really think about AAM as a very long-term process. Right now and today, we are transporting cargo. It's already being done, right? But what will it look like in your community is what's the next thing is, and it'll still be cargo, and it will eventually be air taxis, and it'll be kind of like a special use case for those people who really want it. Where are we in this implementation plan? So again, because Florida is the leader, because the Department of Transportation is really trying to be the leader in this and help guide what communities might want to see. We have developed a guidebook. We are in phase 2. So really the whole purpose of me talking to you all about this at this kind of high level, right, is to make you aware that there is training coming up. That training is for our community. It's for city and county planners. It's for anybody interested in transportation. It's all-day training, and it's split into 2 different components. Again, that's where the guidebook will be discussed, and you'll get a lot of information at that training. These are all the different types of components. So across the top, you see that it's the federal government, the state government, local government, and infrastructure and service providers. So what's going to happen is somebody's going to come in and run these things, but they're going to be in partnership with somebody like an airport, right? And they're going to follow all the federal guidelines and all the state guidelines, and follow what your local community said to do. And why that's important to note is because under all of those things about who has the biggest role, it is the local government. So it is up to your own city commission, city council, board of county commissioners to decide what is it that our community wants to do. It's up to your local planners to decide what will happen in the Sarasota Manatee area in terms of AAM. Right? So there's our guidebook. You see a QR code there. If you're interested in all kinds of information about AAM, the QR code will take you to the website, and it will take you to that guidebook. Then on my next slide, I believe, here's our workshops coming up. So we have one in Bartow, one in Fort Myers. These are 2 of many that are coming up. Brian attended one about a week or so ago. That was in Tampa. So they're being held all over our state. So go to the one that makes sense to you. The first half of the day is for planning staff. So if you are, or you know somebody that is in that planning role, probably would be of interest to you to go. If not, attend and at least go to our website, download some of that material. Then the afternoon is for our elected and appointed officials. Why is that important? Because it's our city and county planners who would be making and deciding on what it looks like in their community, and it will be the elected and appointed officials who will actually have that final say-so of what that community will be doing. I like to always end on a safety slide. That's my partner back there, Keith Robbins, so I know he's happy when I do that. And my safety slide today is the move over, about a year, probably at this point, a year and a half ago. That law changed just a little bit. Everyone got real accustomed to moving over for somebody like police or fire. But now you get to move over in case it's just a regular old disabled vehicle, giving them the space that they deserve and need so that they can do what they need to do on the side of the road and hopefully prevent a crash. That is the end of this presentation. I'm happy to try to address any questions unless I've answered questions already. Yes, ma'am, please go ahead.
Let's do a question. First is this. It's this district, this area, it's such a pilot program. You mentioned something about cargo sovereignty. How much cargo can you fit in one of those? And my second question is about hurricanes. I mean, I just, and it also said in the future it will be unmanned. And I need a lot more information on this, and a lot more data before I'm comfortable with it.
So let me try to remember what you were asking me about hurricanes and about what?
At what speed does it take flight?
When will they take flight?
No, at what wind speed does it quit flight?
Yeah, that's a great question and one I do not have an answer to because this was a high level orientation to AAM, and that is a very good and detailed question. Go ahead, Ryan.
I have two answers.
Oh, great. Thank you, Ryan.
For the cargo, it's about the size of your local Amazon truck. So think local deliveries, not 737, right? Flying for FedEx or something like that. It's a local delivery size. So think of your normal truck that drives through your neighborhood. That's about the capacity that it handles. The vertical takeoff aspect of it, we just heard this presentation last week. It's about 12 have gone to our state legislators, 12 separate, they call them OEMs, they're companies, providers of the technology that are through FAA testing. So great point. Obviously, no one wants to get into one of these unless they're deemed safe. They have to follow the same FAA regulations, standards of anybody flying commercial aircraft. Eventually, there's thought to be privatized, right? Similar to somebody getting their pilot's license and flying a Cessna. Very similar operation to that. So they would still have to pass full FAA guidelines. Obviously, lots of testing to come in that. 2028 was the date that they came up with that they would attempt to have some of these actually operational and flying, but obviously service probably much later than that. Those are the answers that I got from the training last week.
So glad you retained all that. Thank you. Yes.
It sounds like these are gonna operate sort of like helicopters, vertical. Has the FAA weighed in at these, where these land, are these gonna need to be heliports? Or are you planning to just drop them in people's yards? Because I think the FAA has a real problem with people dropping helicopters in people's yards. So have you looked at that situation and how that's gonna, because you got a lot of overhead power lines and things.
Yeah.
So are they looking at that, how that's gonna work with land use regulations, because the local governments regulate where heliports go as well. Well, they don't really regulate, the FAA regulates where heliports go, but they do say don't park a helicopter in your backyard without the proper permission.
I'm gonna start working for Ryan. He has some great answers.
It's a great question. It's the exact same question, it's the exact same question I asked. And it's the guidebook, if you do go to the QR code that she put up there, the guidebook, it's exhaustive in terms of what the FAA requirements are, and it needs substantial land area. right? They don't actually take off and land directly, they use a lot of power to do that, they still need to glide in and out, so a 500-foot navigable channel essentially, plus a 4,000-foot on each side of that landing point. So vertiport still requires substantial footprint and clearance.
It's not that big.
No, agreed. And that's something that is being discussed, which is Michelle's point, and most are being looking to be deployed at our local, international and regional airports, right? At first, right? It's not something that you're gonna see dropping into your backyard. There's been some discussions of unused parking garages in downtown areas because they're higher, they have clearance that way, out of those rescue power lines and things like that, and do have a lot of free reign also out in communities using intercoastal waterways and Gulf waterways as an area to take off and land. There's some potential there, but I would say that's Michelle's point about local government. It seemed like the onus was really on local government decision makers to find sites and locations for vertiports. That's the limiting factor. They think the technology is going to be available sooner than later. It's how you implement it on the ground. Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan. And I'll also add that while I am freely stating that Florida is the leader in our nation when it comes to AAM, the department is also the leader in this new technology and this new way of getting around, right? We are not doing that in a silo. That is not without the Federal Aviation Administration first coming up with all of its guidelines, requirements, and rules in order for the department acting as its state agency to follow through with all of that.
Is there gonna be a role for the MPO and our committee in this discussion?
There will be a role for the MPO. It's minor right now. Dave, do you want to talk to it, or you want me to? Okay.
As federal and even state funds get allocated to support this type of service and technology, then there could be a role in incorporating it into our plans. That's really the role now, is to sort of prepare for it and look out and work with local jurisdictions that are interested in supporting it, which is what the state has asked us to do. And right now it's private sector driven, and they're looking for places where they can start, playing with their equipment.
Thank you, Dave.
So you'll be asked to subsidize it at some point, but not as a committee, as an individual. Personal opinion there.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Steve?
Trying to figure it out. Is it safe to say that it is gonna be private sector driven, private company driven? Locally, they're looking for places to land or places to set up? Is that what I can take away from this?
I cannot say for certainty that it will always be a vendor, a private vendor coming in and doing this, right? Today, that's what it looks like. You heard, was it Ryan that you stated 12
Yeah,
12 different vendors?
essentially startups, right,
Yeah.
that are privatizing. And I've gone to legislature, state legislature, national, state house, and senate, saying, basically asking for the FAA to evaluate the deployment of their technology. So yes, it would be up to the local governments to help then identify site locations to eventually allow those to take off and land, right? Because you'd have to have comprehensive plan amendments, you'd have to have, basically, Bob's point, you have to have like heliports, you have to have clearances around specific buildings, sight lines, things like that, because these do fly 1,000, 3,000 feet, they're not 30,000 feet. Well, the airport, like Hidden River Airport, right, there's not like a tower there or anything like that, how would they become available for them? Hidden River is a good example where I think it is, it's right there, it's a private runway for people that live in that neighborhood. That is a good application. That's in the eastern part of the county that doesn't have a lot of conflict points, right? It would be on the county to cite that as a location for that use. And then there's an application process. It's all in the guidebook. You have to apply for that through the FAA, through FDOT. DOT has the final review call on those site proposals. And they go about their business to say, this is work or not. And the business can determine it's profitable for them, right? Does that make sense?
This is an example of a new technology, and there are many other technologies that are being pursued. We talk about drone delivery of groceries even. gonna take over the need for expanding highways. And, you know, that thought was being pushed as few as 5 or 6 years ago. I don't think anyone expects that to happen anytime soon anymore, but this stuff is coming. And it's coming from all directions. One of the MPOs in North Florida said that they're working with private sector companies and local governments to place drones that would then, during a 911 call, where if the AI, artificial intelligence, listening detected the need for a defibrillator to be delivered, as soon as that was detected, it would take off and head that way. And deliver within, you know, a certain period of time within the given delivery area. They're looking at, you know, other people are out there, former military, now trying to commercialize technology related to response to active shooters, where a drone comes in as part of a response and both distracts and disarms or disables the active shooter in a situation. And so it's not the same, but these are other things that are happening that are making use of the computing power that's becoming readily available.
Community County does have a Narcan and AED right now. Yeah, it's similar technology, just deployed, you know, private sector comes up with ideas and that's on government to figure out how to make it work.
Right, and use of airspace and alternatives to, you know, putting in traditional ambulances, anyway, things.
All right,
Thank you.
just,
Yes, ma'am.
sorry, I just sent, George Cruz an email today asking him because 2 years ago, a year ago, they came up with a medical drone that was going to only service Lakewood Ranch. Then it was supposed to expand, and then we never heard another word about it.
No, you're right.
So I said, I think it needs to be an agenda item, and we need an update on its taxpayers paying for it. Now, it's been a year not happening.
Interesting subject.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. You're up for the next point.
I am. Am I good here? Just to keep going.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you.
Okay, so again, Michelle Peranto, I'm the district transit administrator. And about 6 years ago, my district secretary, LK Mandam, asked me to take on another role. I was gonna say a different role, it's like another role. So I'm still the transit administrator. He asked me to take on this planning role as well. And he has this idea about how do we create a different transportation network within our own communities. And he really felt passionate that that would happen at a planning level, right? So coming back to plans, he chose me as the transit person because he said, I think we can make a real difference with public transportation from a planning perspective. And I agreed and I said, okay, well, let's move forward. And so we did. And so with any good initiative that's given to a department employee anyway, we first have to come up with a vision, a mission, some goals, a process, and a strategic plan. And that's exactly what we did. This is today's vision and mission. You'll see some words that are bolded there. And they talk about various modes of transportation. So our modal component here, when I use that term, it's using all variations of modes. So it's bike ped, it's transit, it's rail, it's seaport, it's freight. It's everything that happens within our roadway network. When I use that term, I don't just mean the road, I mean everything that blends into that road, right? This used to say, the vision and mission used to be very specific to public transportation. And how would we impact our roadway network through public transportation? So we got pretty good at that. We have some great success stories and great successes along the way. Today, we are branching out and we're talking more now to our airports, trying to understand what that looks like, and talking to our seaports and our freight industry as well. So it's true that this is kind of a big, chart of what do all those circles and ovals mean. And for you all, when you think of a project that you think should happen, right? And like, what is the MPO doing? They're busy doing all kinds of stuff, but what are they doing? And how do we get involved and what kind of decisions can be made? This is where you want to end up in this blue oval here, where it says adopted work program. Once you're there, your project is happening. How do you get there? It's about a 20-year process most of the time. So you start with the idea, and then you go through all of your planning, your design, your right-of-way, your construction, and you end up there and you have a completed project. What does that have to do with the planning element? You cannot get there without your project first being in its own plan. And the orange triangle is about every mode has a plan. We have a freight plan, we have a seaport plan, we have an airport master plan, we have a transit plan. So this idea of everything working together, the green circles are things that the MPO does. So that's what you're in charge of, right? Making sure that those things are happening. The blue is SDOT and the orange is our partners in our modal industry. When LK gave us this assignment, and I do have two colleagues who were unable to make it with me this evening, but we work close together and we're a little bit of a think tank of what can we do differently than what's already being done, and how can we integrate ourselves into projects that are already happening that have been through the planning process, but maybe we can overlay them with a little something additional. LK asked us to always think outside the box for practical solutions without financial limitations. I love that quote. It came to me at a time when I was had about 20 years of experience with the Florida Department of Transportation. And I always had a budget. So you had to work within that budget, don't go a penny over. And then I have the top leader in my district telling me, don't worry about money. Just think of the solution. I was like, all right, well, that sounds kind of fun. So that's what we did. And then we take that idea and we start peeling it away. What is it that we can do? What can we afford? What do we have the capacity to do? So we've done that in the last 6 years. And again, we have some pretty good successes, but it all comes back to what will you do from a planning perspective in order to change your transportation network? Our goals, these are pretty simple. They're towards the end is technology. So that's how I got ingrained with this AAM thing and being kind of the spokesperson, the initial spokesperson for that. These things usually change, like we start the think process. And then we go to the experts and say, okay, now it's yours, and we hand off our projects. So one of the really great things about this slide, when we made these goals 6 years ago, and they really have not changed hardly at all. We put that goal number 1, develop relationships with MPOs and modal agencies and partners and other FDOT offices. So because I'd been in this industry for a while, I had these relationships already kind of established. But what I didn't know was going to happen is to the level that those relationships would become better and deeper and more meaningful. And that every time I call this MPO and ask for another meeting or ask to be put on an agenda, the answer is always yes. They don't tell me no. I don't know, am I just a nice person, or did we get that relationship developed so well that they understand that we truly are partners in this. And then through these goals, we were able to come up with our processes, like how are we really gonna do this? What does this look like? We're changing a transportation network. How do you do that? And it's through those relationships and ensuring that you have those. Our secretary, LK, thought it was important enough that when we started this, he said, I wanna meet with our transit directors and our airport directors individually and in person. So that's what we did. They all agreed to come along the ride with us. And they became even stronger partners to us and with us. And we work with them all of the time, but specifically we have quarterly meetings with them. which has generated a lot of great ideas, some of which I'm gonna talk about later. And again, it has built that relationship. It's been the one thing that I've learned the most out of this process, along with a lot of engineering stuff. Again, I'm not the engineer, but I've learned a lot about that. Learned a little bit about aviation, didn't know that that would happen, but I've learned a great amount about how to develop great relationships. These are some of our successes that we've had. These are a lot of the fun ones. So right here in your own community, State Road 789, that's known as the Ringling Bridge. The department was doing a very large project in that area. It's the Gulf Stream Roundabout. Some of you may have driven through that. And the city and the county came to DOT and said, hey, can you help us with all the congestion you're about to create because of this huge construction project? And we went back to the table and we said, well, okay, we'll put a bus over the bridge. And so that's what we did. And today that's the Bay Runner. And it's hugely successful. The residents love it. The guests who visit us love it. It's full all the time. And then in that, because it was so successful, we started really looking at the roadway and really trying to understand what was happening. We quickly felt like we could develop space for that bus to be in its own lane, but we had to get there. So we first developed a shared bus bike shoulder. So there was enough space on the bridge that we allowed the bus under certain conditions to ride in the shoulder with the bicyclist. That lasted about 9 months. And through that process, we also learned of 3 other projects that were happening in that same exact area, which allowed us in the end today to create a separated bike lane, a separate bus lane, 2 travel lanes up and over the bridge. It's going to be soon on either sides of the bridge. We call those the approaches. So it goes almost to the roundabout, it goes just over the bridge a little bit, and then we have another project coming on the Little Ringling Bridge that will do the same exact thing. We call that a typical section. So that typical section will look like exactly what it looks like today on the John Ringling Bridge, and we just keep extending it as projects keep getting programmed. We're like, oh, got another one, we can do more, right? So that was a very fun project. Our next project is right next door here, the Sarasota Bradenton International Airport ground transportation. We started having those quarterly meetings with our transit agencies, our MPO, and ourselves, just to have a little chat. Everybody on the same page. What do y'all need? What do you want? What do you want to talk about? What kind of ideas do you have? And it came out from our transit agency that the Sarasota Bradenton Airport was building a brand new ground transportation facility. So that's where you get off the plane, you go get your Uber, your Lyft, or you get on the bus, right? They said, the transit agency said, I don't think it's exactly what we need. Can you do anything about that? And so that's what I mean, that we're kind of the think tank. People just come to us and say, can you help? Or we generate ideas and then we see them through. So I went to my aviation partners in my own building, asked them if they knew about it, they did. Within a short amount of time, we had a change order in place. We asked for the Sarasota Airport consultant to begin working directly with our transit agencies to better understand what their needs were. And they did that openly and with great communication. So today, they do have a brand new ground transportation. I did that on the break. I was here this morning for the technical advisory committee, and then we went over to the airport and took a look at it and got some great pictures. But that would not have happened had this group, our C3MP group, that hadn't been created, if we hadn't asked the question, if we hadn't had these joint meetings with everybody in the room, making sure that everyone's on the same page. Our transit safety study pilot, this is what Keith talked about a little bit earlier. We have the top 20, so that's our roads, right? We get kind of selfish sometimes, so we call them our roads, those are our state roads. And we have John, our colleague who develops that top 20, showing serious injury and fatalities. He came to C3MP and said, I think I can help you all. Let me try this little pilot study. So we did a pilot study in Manatee County. We took that methodology from how we got to that top 20 and added in what's happening at transit stops in terms of bicycle and ped movements, in terms of serious injury and fatal crashes. And so now and that was successful in terms of the methodology worked. So now we have like this double layer. We have John's top 20 report. We've layered it with transit activity and crashes that are happening around stops, so that we can better be prepared for what type of safety improvement we might need. We liked it so much, we're doing it in 4 other counties. Next on our list is the Polk County Sunrail expansion. Nathan reminded me today to say this is not Brightline. Okay, it's not Brightline. Brightline is privately funded. Sunrail is not privately funded. Sunrail is that full commuter rail system up in the Orlando area. And for many years, probably about 15 years, our own Polk County TPO has had it in their planning documents. They've been talking about it, they want it. And so finally that came to fruition, probably about 2 years ago. We were able to get some money for a feasibility study that went from a feasibility study and is today in a PD&E study. PD&E is project development and engineering, where they look at everything around what kind of critters are we harming or not harming, and where can we really accomplish this? What kind of space do we have? Our State Road 33 construction microtransit project, that is a result of the C3MP team going out into our own DOT and having these same type of conversations with our own folks and asking them to always consider us and always consider a multimodal solution regardless of what that might look like. Ask the question. So that project manager did, he said, we have a little bit of a problem with like 2 DOT projects happening at almost the same time. And they're within a mile of each other, within a short distance of each other. Congestion's gonna be terrible. And what can we do? And I said, well, I don't know. I'm not sure I have all the answers, but let me call my transit agency and see what it is that they wanna do. So they came up, our transit agency in Polk County came up with a great plan. The construction project is through the major medical corridor in that city, which meant that those bus stops were gonna be shut down because of the construction. So how were all those people who were taking the bus going to be able to get to their medical appointment? So they came up with this microtransit solution where they kind of go out to the neighborhoods, pick the people up, bring them to a central location, and then from there they can get to their medical appointments. That's also the same corridor. I forgot to mention this morning, but because we have it on the agenda to talk about spring training. This is right near our own spring training facility for the Detroit Tigers. They came up with a similar response to our construction project and are doing the same type of thing where they're kind of going out to the neighborhoods, going to certain spots, bringing people into the ballpark. So that's a great thing that they did. And then this last thing is advanced air mobility. So I'm not going to talk anymore about that because I already did that, right? But it is one of our successes that we're proud to be doing it. We're proud to be in your communities talking about it, with the hopes of having maybe Sarasota or Manatee County selected as one of our as one of the places that will take this eVTOL thing and run with it. That is the end of my presentation. I still have the same move over law. Don't forget move over. I will gladly take any questions or comments. Yes, sir.
DOT's getting ready to replace the Cortez Road Bridge as well as soon Manatee Avenue Bridge. Are you adding the bus lanes and bike lanes multimodal to both of those bridges as part of the construction of those? Because there's huge backups trying to get out to the island. Or are you doing it on those as well as the Raymond Bridge that you just did it on?
I don't know what that design looks like, so I would have to get with the design project manager. So that's not, I don't go through and scour all of our design projects. Pam, do you know anything about it?
Yeah.
Ryan?
Yes.
saw some.
The answer is yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, both will have bus on shoulder and improved bike height facilities.
Great.
Anything
Any
else?
other comments, questions? Terrific, thank you.
Thank
Michelle.
you. Yeah.
3 great reports from FDOT. Next up, our own MPO, starting with Nina, long-range transportation plan.
Thank you. So I just wanted to take a moment to give you the regular update on where we are with the 2050 long range plan. We are in the final stretch. The goal is to have a full draft of the long range plan available for public comment no later than August 1st. So you'll be able to take a look at the full complete long range plan. We'll bring it to the committees and the MPO board for review in September. And then we'll bring it back in October for final adoption. We cannot adopt any later than October 21st. So where we are now is in the final stage, which is development of the cost feasible plan. So April 28th, we had a public workshop and great participation from our local jurisdictions. They offered presentations, we had great attendance, and we heard about what some of the local priorities are for the long range plan. On May 6th, last week, we had a public outreach event where we got a little bit more feedback from members of the public and some jurisdictional staff and FDOT on what the local priorities are. In your agenda packets for this agenda item, I linked an interactive map and a zip file. And what's included in the map are all of the projects that are eligible to be included in the 2050 cost feasible plan. What we presented last time was that we have a great deal more projects than we have funding available to fund these projects. So what we are looking for now from our jurisdictions, the electeds, from people in this room, and through a public survey is really what are our top priority projects from these eligible projects. So there's 7 categories of projects. The first is the pipeline projects. These are projects that have 1 or more phases already completed. It's in the work program, or we know that the jurisdiction wants to get this started right away. And then the rest of them are what we call on-program projects. So technology, bike ped, safety, intersections, resiliency, and capacity. You'll see some of these projects are very long. They're 50 projects deep in a particular program. So really what we are looking for is feedback on which of the projects in these lists are the most important. They are ranked it went through the MPO's prioritization process. So projects that are ranked number 1 scored very, very high, and the ones that scored less, way less against the MPO's goals and objectives. However, that's not to say that this list is set in stone. If there are projects that ranked a little lower that you still think are very important, we want to know about that. And there's an opportunity to elevate that and move those up the list. So once we have all of the feedback, we are going to draft a cost feasible plan, bring that to you all for feedback, so that by the time July rolls around, we have a full draft that we're comfortable with. So with that said, we do have a public survey open currently. If you go to the MPO website, you can access it. Or you can take a look at these maps and you can email us your feedback directly. Like I said, this is the final stretch. We're looking towards the finish line. This is also arguably one of the more important parts of the plan, because these are projects that your local jurisdictions can apply for funding through the MPO moving forward.
Good, thank you. Any comments or questions for Nina? Mr. Suarez. Baseball stadium.
Sure. We have back for you. Our last 2 presentations are our ongoing studies that we're working on, and with us here today is Ryan Forrest from Kelly Warren. He's going to give us an update on some of our progress thus far on Ed Smith. We've made some project recommendations that we're working to be incorporated in the long-range plan, as Nina mentioned. So he's got some information, some data for you, as well as some preliminary project recommendations. So we'll happily take any questions at the end, but for now, I'll hand it over to Ryan.
All right, thanks everyone. Ryan Suarez with Kimley Horn. I was last here in March. So 2 things today. An update, as Ryan mentioned, and the second piece, talk about projects. And back to Nina, what Nina was talking about, it's important to talk about projects because there's this ongoing effort on development of the cost feasible plan. We want to make sure we're consistent with what's going on with the LRTP. The schedule is up here. Recall we organized our process into 3 major phases. We're on schedule. We're towards the end of that green bar, just starting to come up with solutions, recommendations, again, ensuring that we're consistent with the LRTP process. Since we last met, I think I had kind of a broad overview of one of our game day observations. We did complete the second game day observation. I'll talk a little bit more about each one of these, including boycotted. There are several people here in this room that actually participated on that. Traffic operations analysis, I'll briefly go over that as well, and reinforce the interactive map, which is our outreach tool. So I'll show that again. Let's talk about game day observations. We organized this where we picked two and we varied by day and time of day. We picked a Rays game and a Yankees game. So the Rays game was on a Saturday afternoon around 1 p.m. and the Yankees game was a weekday, a Thursday evening. We picked these two games because we thought they would be high attendance games, and in fact, they were, particularly the Yankees. Now, the lot of observations that we've got in terms of pad traffic, what I've got illustrated here are traffic cues that we would observe. In the red is what we saw in terms of traffic cues before the game, as people were getting to the game. In the yellow are the egress after the game. You see the yellow arrow going north. So there's three lots, as hopefully, if you're not familiar, there's three parking lots. The east lot, which is adjacent to the stadium south of 12th. There's the north lot, which is the largest parking lot. And then there is the lot on the other side of 12th Street, the youth athletic complex. East lot's definitely the one that everyone goes to initially. That gets full, traffic gets redirected up to 12th, and there are backups all the way. And I was standing, walking down Tuttle. They did back up all the way to the elementaries and beyond. And then because of that, because people ended up shooting north, there's the backup on 12th because they're redirected into that north line. Now, but back to Danny's point, I appreciate what you said earlier. This backup about 45 minutes before the game. So it's not terrible. It's not terrible. Probably could be some full signage to direct folks to the youth athletic complex lot as opposed to the north lot, thereby reduce some of that traffic. So what we did see is a lot of pedestrian movements and cyclists trying to get across Tuttle and using Tuttle for other purposes, and where that traffic comes into conflict with those users, we did flag because it is a problem. On the egress, people trickle out of baseball games. They don't all come out at once, probably around the 6th, 7th inning. Really the only traffic jam was, and the way the Orioles handle this, they shoot people north off. I think that's called String Field, up north to 17th, and then folks get redirected. And I imagine they're trying to get out to the highway, so they're going north on Tuttle, Lovewood Ridge, or Beneva to get up to Fruitville. The bike audit was significant. A lot of times we plan and design roadways with a plan view, and we allocate right-of-way to different uses, sidewalk, preservation of the right-of-way, bike lanes. There's nothing like being out there and in first person experiencing what other bike riders experience. It was a 9-mile ride. The configuration is shown here. We had about 12 bikers, which included myself, MPO staff. We had Danny with us. Thank you very much for him participating, because we did need some experienced bike riders out there. There's some conditions out there on some of those roadways. Now, I'm not an avid bike rider. I just use a beach cruiser normally. You're out on Fruitville or 17th Street, just this isn't the right type of facility. A lot of times we convey bike facilities in terms of their level, their stress levels. Is this a stressful roadway for a bike rider, right? So areas such as East, and I'm just gonna flag a bunch of pictures, bring them up here. East and Lime, these are largely neighborhoods, low volume roads. Those, in our experience, those were low stress roadways where everybody generally felt comfortable. I mentioned 17th, I mentioned Fruitville. Even though there's facilities and they're adequate in size, the amount of trucks, trailers, the proximity, the speed of that travel really made for an uncomfortable situation for those who aren't experienced in biking these types of and navigating these types of roadways and understanding what's happening out there on the road as well. 12th Street was an interesting roadway. Our study area is bordered 301 on the west and Beneva all the way on the east. You really can divide this up into 3 different sections. Out on 12th, again, even though it's low volume, I think I used the term level of exposure. Even though it's low volume and you have facility, really feel unprotected out there. So you have a different experience as opposed to the nice walkway, or let's call it a trail that's right in front of the stadium on the south side. For those who are familiar, once you get out east of a Tuttle, there really aren't any facilities there. And even though there's low volume of traffic, because there's no space for cyclists, either along the road or at the intersection, space to wait for that light to turn, it did create for an uncomfortable situation. So this was eye-opening. It helps us get to some details and to some fixes that are real world and they make sense for bikers on the street. Any questions about this one? Okay, very good. Traffic analysis. Now these traffic analysis, again, they get sophisticated. What we did was an intersection capacity analysis. We had 15 intersections that we flagged. We went out there and collected counts, ran them through a traffic modeling tool called Synchro, and generated a level of service. How many of you are familiar with roadway level of service? Most, who's not? Okay. Well, roads are graded based on their level of service or roadway is really based on capacity. Or if they're over capacity, there's a grading system, just like an academic grading system. On A, you pass, and F, you fail. If you're an F, you're over capacity, basically. So if you got a 2-lane road, it can only carry so many cars. If the amount of traffic that's going through there is more than the capacity, then you're, that's the way it's graded. So in this type of analysis, we went out there and counted cars, and it wasn't just the roadway itself, it's the intersection. Is there enough capacity in that intersection to handle the volume of traffic that's going through? So to say, there's a big table in our report that has all these different movements and the LOS. I'm gonna spare you all those details, and I just called out a few which are related to our game day operation. So 12th and Tuttle, going both east and west, we had an LOS of E, which that's getting close to being over capacity, right? Probably needs some type of improvement. Fruitville and Tuttle was probably the worst of the bunch. Most egregious movements were in the northbound and southbound directions. So this was true during the event and also during the AM peak and the PM peak. We did count 3 different times, AM peak, PM peak, and during the select spring training baseball game. There's a lot more detail to this. Again, we have a technical memo that's going to include some tabulations of this information, but for the purposes of this presentation, again, I'm trying to keep it simple here. Any questions about this? I hate to run through it. Yes, sir.
You establish level of service not during game peak?
The traffic counts that are AM and PM peak were non-game day. So they were compared to the event. So in other words, we did counts for 3 different periods.
Okay.
The AM, PM, and the event was a Pirates game. I believe it was on March 6th.
Okay, so you also established what your
The bench
level of service is for non-game related times.
Correct.
Okay.
So the way this is laid out, we've got AM, we got PM, then we got game day level of service for all those movements at all those 15 intersections.
And so it's like level of service E or F on all of those.
For these two.
Okay.
And maybe that's a good point, Bob. For the most part, a lot of these intersections are operating at level D or above. Level D is really the acceptable level of service in most cases. So we're doing pretty good, for the most part.
Ryan, how long are your peak times?
7 to 9 and 4 to 6. Those were the traffic counts for AM and PM. Okay, projects. Now, we've collected a lot of info, we've done some brainstorming, we've organized our projects into a level of detail and improvement type, which is shown here in this 3rd column to your right. Bicycle and pedestrian improvements, street retrofits, traffic operations, and a mix of other different types that are shown here. Important for us here is we've rolled up all our improvements by quarter. And this is important because this is what you'll see reflected in how things are being submitted and considered in the long-range transportation plan, cost feasible plan. So you'll see the color coding here. We did that again to convey that, okay, which of our projects fall within corridors that are pipeline projects as Nina described. These are projects that have had a previous phase funded. They're priority projects. In other words, they are part of that priority list that are already prioritized by the NPO through their process. And then we have a whole host of new Ed Smith projects, which is in the pink. And I know this graphic doesn't help. This one's probably a little bit better because this lays them out in terms of our study area. Now, we still have some additional work to do. There is some field work that we want to perform, some outreach that we want to also perform. There's some stakeholders that I think we also need to reach. Our friends at Breeze also want us to take a look at travel patterns to and from the stadium to see if there's opportunities for operational improvements and not just capital improvements and infrastructure improvements, such as what we've got so far. So I want to say we're probably about 80 to 90% close. We still need some fine tuning in terms of those projects as well. So right now, we've got concepts, we've got a general idea of projects, but we do need to phase these. I think I heard Dave mention phasing, breaking these projects up into smaller chunks. And that's important because there's an issue of funding. Funding for LRTP projects is not the same this time around as it was last time, 5 years ago. And we recognize that in order to get these projects done, we're gonna have to be a little more creative, maybe parse them out into smaller pieces. Any questions about that? So we're gonna be coming back to you with some more specificity, something that's more detailed for each one of these quarters, as we kind of move through this over the summer. Who did I lose? Did I lose everybody? Okay. All right. The interactive map is important. If you haven't gone in there and identified some ideas, problem areas, issues, fixes that you think, I would encourage everyone to jump in and complete, share it with your constituents, your friends, whomever. We've only collected about 50. In some instances, folks would say that was great. We definitely want more. We're gonna keep this open for a while, okay, as we kind of work through projects over the coming months.
Ryan, are you talking to the Orioles about this too?
We have a list of some ideas to share with them about our observations. So, yeah, we gotta compile that and circle back to them. We kind of need an approach to be able to talk to them. You don't have a constructive conversation, but yes, we are.
Thank you.
All right. Questions?
Thanks very much. Thanks. Last on the MPO. Barrier Island Implementation Plan.
Yeah, I think with us here tonight is Nathan Couch with Gilson Associates. He's gonna give us a quick update on our Barrier Island congestion study. We're in a kind of similar position. We're working through a lot of the data, also making some recommendations for projects moving forward. So with that, I'll hand it over to Nathan to give us a quick update.
Thank you. So where are we? We've gotten through the stakeholder meetings. We're working now into developing a toolkit. We have our operations recommendations, and we've also been through the literature reviews of both previous studies as well as case studies from around the state and nation. So with the development of the toolkit, we broke it up into 4 sections. We're gonna have the break into the proposal, a small description. The key parts though, we want to look at the impact, the cost and the timeline, short, medium and long term. And then we're gonna link to the source. Our goal with this is we are not identifying these improvements. What we're doing is compiling them from other studies. And we want people to be able to go back and look at what was done at that time to see if it's still viable. Let me rephrase that. We have seen it's viable, but to see if it's something that they want to pursue further. Policy, so the first one was transit mobility, getting into policy toolkit, looking at resiliency, and then the operations and roadway is a lot of the analysis that we did. We've gotten to the point where we're looking at the impact as much as we can. For the ones that we can put into something like synchro, We've looked at some sort of measure, whether it's delay, level of service, something like that, as well as doing an engineer's estimate for the cost. The next steps is looking at the items and trying to come up with a ranking for it, right? Looking at whatever congestion reduction we can find and comparing it to the cost and doing essentially a benefit cost analysis on it. There are going to be some considerations for these. I like to use the 64 in East Bay or the Gulf to Marina Drive, that little stretch as an example. For instance, we are not going to necessarily be recommending a project for the alternate routes from East Bay at 64 to Gulf and Marina. That's a really big project. It's going to need a lot of community support. What we would be recommending is saying, we think this is viable. Let's get into a further study where we're doing a little more hands-on work with the community, micro simulation and modeling to make sure that this really works instead of like the high level analysis that we're doing right now. So that would be more of the recommendation as opposed to recommending that particular project right off the bat. The other exception would be things like the 64 in East Bay. There's currently a roundabout under design. So where our recommendations, we are confident will work. One of the kind of things we're working for when we're looking at ranking it as to what we should focus on first is keeping that in mind. While it may be effective, we don't want, a throwaway cost. You don't want to spend $600,000 and then in 3 years come back and throw it out and do something else. So a lot of that's looking at what the footprint is, seeing if it is going to be throwaway or if it is recoverable. And then what's a realistic timeline for construction? If it's going to be another decade before it gets built, that starts looking a lot more attractive. After this, we're going to be looking at community feedback. So it looks like we're going to be looking at an event in Coquina Beach and then also one in Siesta Key as well. All of that information to be compiled, taken into consideration, working with the MPO for the kind of the ranking of what the recommended ranking is. Obviously, this is not dictating what's going to happen. It's just saying, hey, based off of our criteria and our metrics, we think this is the order it should be pursued, and then the MPO can pursue, MPO or the local cities can pursue the projects as they will after that. The information will end up being put on the online dashboard. Any questions?
So
Yes, sir.
is this the study that's evaluating the traffic
Yes, sir.
also, right, that we've talked about before?
Yes, sir.
So, and I don't know, maybe this is a level of detail beyond what you're presenting here, but I've had feedback this past week that I guess the mayor, the city of Bradenton is open to, he thinks that we could acquire property now, because of the storms, and there's a bunch of damaged houses at Cortez and the Gulf of Mexico Drive there. And possibly closing off a street and extending that right turn lane. So is that something y'all are looking at? Has that been brought up?
We looked at it previously, but in the stakeholder meeting, it wasn't supported.
Well, they're telling me now that they would support it. So how does that get back to you? Am I the conduit to do that?
I can talk to Mayor Chappie.
Yeah, I think you need to, because this is just last week. He conveyed this to some colleagues of mine.
Okay.
So, okay.
He was in the stakeholder meeting, but I can reach out to him again.
Yeah, I think it would bear good fruit if you would do that. So, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nate, or maybe even Ryan, are you guys incorporating a robust ferry service into your thinking at all?
It is in the water travel. So there's a number, obviously there's the existing, and then there's a number of other feasibility studies. It is a recommendation. It's just we're identifying it from the literature review, like there's a ton of studies out there. So we're pulling it in and saying, yes, we keep this as viable, but we are not doing any additional.
And I would add for the purpose of this study, that's not what it's about. We're looking at, we are doing in the near future regional transit study as well. That would incorporate the future implementation of water taxi services beyond, rail, bus travel, all those other things. Water taxi service falls in that.
That was something that came up in my meeting last week, with it.
Yeah, we got a meeting with the transit agencies on Wednesday to go through some other stuff that may change on here. One of the things that I would put with this, all of these are kind of short-term recommendations. Ultimately, especially as the area continues to develop, traffic's never going to decrease. So starting to look at mode shift and things like that, or it's gonna become a lot more valuable. Using those extra bridges with the transit options and looking at things like park and ride or just different things like that are gonna become a lot more viable solutions. Yes, sir. Any other questions?
I guess I do have one other comment because of all the traffic in that area. My understanding is Manatee County, I guess, bought, what was it, the seafood shack, and they're gonna turn that into a marina. So does anyone know if is that part of this too? The evaluation of taking some boat traffic essentially off of, the Gulf of Mexico? Is that
Yes,
just?
so Dave and I had a call last week with Commissioner Southpeak, Manatee County for that purpose, and yeah, there has been thought. The new bridge that they're able to purchase that acquisition and build a lot there as well. And
Gotcha.
potentially build a landing site on either side of the intercoastal for then access to Bridge Street.
Gotcha.
So we're having those conversations. I think we've got a meeting in early June with their team, as well as they need to also formalize that in the county's TDP as well to make that a reality. So there's some things that recommendations there, they want to make it along Cortez as well, and then ultimately that is kind of the end part of that vision for the Cortez Road project is
Right.
to potentially build out a lot, park and ride structure, potentially a landing site for additional ferry service. So that is being considered.
And I would imagine it would take some of the trailer to boat traffic off of Gulf of Mexico now. This trying to get down to the boat ramp.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, we're working together on that.
okay,
Yep.
good point. Thanks.
Very nice.
Thank you, Nate.
Yes, sir.
Okay, because we do not have a quorum, we will have to postpone approving last meeting's minutes to the next meeting. And on the 3 action items, we can't vote on them, but we will still accept the presentations.
Yeah, I'll give you a quick overview on it, just because we've already got it ready to go. But yeah, these are pretty standard items that you see on an annual basis at nearly every meeting. The tip being first, our transit improvement program. We got a nice overview of our process from the C3MP group. So we go to the project priorities process. Ultimately, we submit those to the department for consideration. We work with them over the calendar year to then incorporate them into our transportation improvement program. We received the download from FDOT back in early April. We also incorporated some minor changes to our data and some of the performance metrics parts that were required to update on an annual basis. So we took the download and incorporated it into our process and made that publicly available. That's been open for the last several weeks and will be concluding just prior to the board meeting. So that'll be open for its mandated 30-day public comment period. We received a number of comments on the tip, and we will make sure those are incorporated into the document as well. As always, we're happy to take any questions about any specifics related to projects in the tip. And we'll work with DOT to remedy any questions or answer any questions or, provide any answers that we have. So with that, I'll take any
I
questions.
do have a question.
Sure.
So the Longboat Pass Bridge is listed, it doesn't have a rating number, but it does have PE by it, which is kind of implies that it's in design.
Correct.
But from everything I've heard through the grapevine is they haven't decided on
On a
which
specific-
bridge.
Correct.
So is that still part of the
Yeah,
design?
that'll be part of the
I
design.
guess I would have thought that would have been the preliminary.
Yeah, PD&E
design.
can also,
Okay,
through PD&E, you can take, and that's just when the funding becomes available. So it can be encumbered in that year, right? But doesn't mean the design actually start until they decide
Got it.
on what the PD&E outcome is. So typically, we're following the same kind of procedure with the bridge and Palmetto Connector, right? Trying to find a solution on a specific alternative they'd like to evaluate. Similar situation there. So, you've got your fixed span, you've got your vascular option.
right.
So ultimately, they will have to determine an option before they're expending design funds on a specific bridge.
It's a hot button item.
Yes, absolutely.
We all know that.
Yes, we just met with your new commissioner.
Okay.
And we did talk
Okay,
about the
good.
bridge, talked about a number of other projects on Longboat as well, but yes, they will have to determine the best solution for the bridge option up there before they start designing it.
I think the Cortez Bridge is the same way. It's PE, but I guess I thought that was already, the design was decided upon what type of
Yeah,
bridge it
the
was.
design for that is decided, basically, but yeah. It's still up for debate at Longboat. Pass.
Right.
Questions? Just keep going if you want.
Dan, do you want to add anything
You
here?
can go, Tim. You can do,
Oh, I can do the amendment?
but what they are, these are just standard ones.
Yeah, these are standard amendments. One is for Sarasota and one is for Manatee. It's for the transit, operations, FTA 5307 grants that they receive. And they match the funds that the FTA gives them. So for, where did I go? For Manatee, we have 1,500,000 for FY 2025, and then for Sarasota, we have 3,953,748, which they will match with local funds for 2025.
Very good. That's operational funds.
Yep,
For them to
operations.
operate. So the TAC voted to adopt those this morning, recommend adoption to the board this morning. So I'm gonna go to the board next week for consideration. I've incorporated to. That's all we got on that one.
You're gonna give us a trip update now?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
So we had some good conversations. As you know, TRIP is also an annual item for us. TRIP dollars, as you all know, is our Transportation Regional Incentive Program. It's led off by the department many years ago, and it's to help fund minimize projects that are regionally significant. So typically things that connect to the state highway system, interstate system. As you can see, the projects on the list are quite expensive. And we do remind our local jurisdictions that there's only about $7 or $8 million of TRIP funding available each year in the entire district. So, needless to say, we're probably not gonna fund the $200 million worth of projects that are on this list. However, they do view this as an opportunity to get it on a regional list. So if they go out for their own individual grant programs, or if they want to go out for a state appropriation, it provides them the flexibility to do that. So we do have an interlocal, the last thing I'll add on that, we do have interlocal agreements with both Polk and Charlotte County. Both are slightly different. Charlotte, we wait until somebody gets money, essentially, those that stay in first place until you get some type of funding on the project. In Polk County, they alternate annually. So there's the only difference on that. We did receive a little bit of TRIP funding last year from Oxawalla or Manatee County. And we did receive, I think, a little bit more in the past several years on some of those operational improvements in downtown Bradenton as well. Those were deferred because the project took a little too long, but it's still in design as well. But we will take this list to the board as well for consideration. This has gone to them several times. They're aware of the projects that are on this list. It's up to them to support, and ultimately we'll distribute this list back to the state for the separate TRIP application process, and then ultimately funding consideration in the upcoming work program. Okay, thank you.
Last piece of business is just to go around the table. If anybody has any comments or things they wanted to share, I'll start with Mr. Carr.
I'm fine.
Thanks.
Good, Rob. Sorry. Bob.
Go ahead.
Good.
Eddie?
I did what, we talked about it earlier, the what do they call it, net zero, whatever, for, you know, and I understand that term that we're all using, and I'm in agreement with it. But I do get a lot of questions from, probably on a weekly basis, I'm trying to explain the zero, why we're shooting for zero. And I think in maybe I missed the last meeting we had, but the one before, someone explained that that is also a state term that is being used by the state legislature or something like that. Is that right?
Yes. Great.
Target
zero.
Target zero.
And then vision zero is the nationwide.
Okay, so that's where that, because I'm telling people that, and that's. And that kind of helps quell the conversation a little bit that we've had that discussion ever since I got on this board. It seems like it comes up every time we talk about it. But anyway, I just wanted to toss that out there. So
Thank you. Anything else to go to the order?
Can I ask a question of that? You have people asking, why are we trying to get zero?
yes, they don't. It's a mindset. People think, well, zero is never going to be, and you touched on it. We're never going to get there. But you have to set a goal, and it's a good goal to set. Right. Usually when I've explained that, but it's people want, I guess, maybe, I think I looked at one of the graphs that you had maybe 7 or 8, maybe 10 years ago. There was actually a number there, right? It wasn't zero, it was whatever that number was, whatever it was, right? So, you know,
Can I offer another thought? So it's not just goal setting, right? Because it's not even just the political, I don't wanna say that's acceptable. It's also a mindset shift from the practitioner to where if you allow that a certain number of steps are acceptable, next time you go into a project, it relieves you of the responsibility to do anything about it. So
Right.
saying that no are acceptable means that you have the responsibility. If you have the knowledge, you have to go in and do something. So it's not just a political goal setting, it's also
Right.
a mindset that you can and will do something, and you can't just, people are stupid, I'm walking away from it.
I agree, and I think that's some of the words that I've used to explain it to people. But again, it's their reference point, their life, some people just approach.
Yeah.
Well,
Kind of things differently.
And I like the way Nathan described that, and, because I would agree with you when it's not a political thing, although some may try to claim it, I don't. In the department. It's everything what Nathan said, there's a public safety announcement that the department did a few years ago. It really, it asked that question, it asked the guy, what's an acceptable number? 50,
Well,
and then 50 people come around the corner, that's my family, that's my friends.
Right.
What's the acceptable number? 0. And to me, that's the essence of it. If somebody says, well, why go? Well, then that means that you're telling me that my life doesn't matter. And you're saying that your life doesn't matter.
Right.
Well, I disagree, every life.
There used to be some reports that we had to produce for FHWA. So I used to work for the department. And it was reviewing the fatalities, and the traditional way of doing it was finding fault in the roadway. So essentially the way it almost, when I came into the position, and looked at it, it was almost legalistic in the sense of like the roadway's not at fault, which is, I guess depending on your perspective, true. Like the roadways are generally designed for the physics of driving a car. There is some human factors into traffic engineering where it's like, how fast can your mind process something, so that's where the sign used to be with the sign letters. That doesn't, I think it's the gentleman over there, I've heard him speak a couple times, speak to the human side of driving. So where we're no longer, especially traffic engineers, it's not as much the physics of driving a car, treating traffic like water or something like that. It's almost an industrial engineering act, and I think it's getting people past that to where, like with an industrial, if you look at like an industrial engineer or architect versus like a structural engineer, right? We've been designing roads like a structural engineer, like it functions, it's there, it will stand. Whereas the Fed, you need to design it around how the human actually uses it. So so when we get into those reports, we're looking at it, it is less, there's no fault of the roadway more into like we doing something like the key thing.
as a friend of mine used to say, when you're driving, you're depending on a lot of people making good decisions around you.
And that's of course the same system approach that Keith was talking about, where if one piece fails, you have another piece there.
Right. Right. Yeah, I agree. But to your point, you're developing an educational program. I think the target 0 is needs, you'll never explain to everyone to their satisfaction. There are just people that they're just that way. They want to have a number, they don't think 0 is ever going to be a number. That was one of the conversations I had. It's okay, we can agree to this.
David?
Part of the challenge for our area is even with engineering improvements, like Keith talked about earlier, sometimes people still ignore. We do changes, we have enforcement, we have education, and we have, trying to change people's mindset. We have more and more people coming here, 20,000 a year for our region. And that's gonna continue, by 2050, 400,000 new residents.
They're all bringing their smartphones.
That's right.
And maybe we'll have it.
Well, hopefully the
embedded in
cars
our
will be
range by
smarter
then.
too. The cars are getting better.
The cars are getting safer.
Right.
But we have more and more people bicycling and walking, and that's a good thing. But if they walk on the wrong side of the road, whatever you think that is, I was taught, if you're walking, you walk on the left, unless you're on a trail or.
Yes, correct.
And then you ride your bike with traffic.
Right.
but I see a lot of people riding their bikes against traffic. And that's, you know, it's so, but I'm not trying to blame the riders, I think that it's just symptomatic of more people out using our great weather, you know, it's not gonna change, so we're fighting an uphill battle to get to zero in some ways, but I think we are in other areas and in certain places and in ways we're making progress. A lot of it comes back to land use, where we have walkable, safe communities, people do walk. And we have our urban cores and placemaking, which is part of our strategy, supporting that. Like these baseball studies, and you know, what can we do with transportation investments to support a more walkable, livable community that supports the, you know, economic development of the community, their comp plan implementation. We will make progress, but you know, it's only one thing worse than too much traffic, and that's none. Anyway,
Good point.
we'll get there, hopefully.
Very good. Okay, thank you all for coming. See you in September. We are adjourned.
Thank you.